All right, we're going to be doing our history review. We're going to start in lesson 9. Mainly just the underlined things. This is highlighted, but they are underlined on every page. Lesson 10, 11 really doesn't have anything on the test. 12 and 13 are the bulk of it. There's just a couple things on lesson 14 and 15. So we'll put those in as well. But the main bulk of it is 9, 10, 12, and 13. And I'll be doing this on kind of a small picture of what we have on the board, are the posters in our classroom for history. So we'll just jump right in. All right, I wrote this already. The Indians were here first in what the land that is now Missouri was occupied by Indians first. The Osage tribe kind of occupied the southern and western. So this is the southern border, the western border. We'll write Osage tribe, and it was more than a fourth of the land. So we'll probably 1/4 plus. They lived in more than a fourth of the land was occupied by the Osage tribe. The first white men to actually arrive in the area were I'm going to write their names right here. I'm not going to write the whole name out. You can see that in your lesson, but Marquette and Joliet, you can probably tell that they're French. I'm not sure I'm saying their names right, but that's good enough. They were explorers sent by France, and in 1673, they marked the spot where the Missouri River, which is right here, emptied into the Mississippi River. So the Missouri River flows down, empties into the Mississippi, and they marked that spot in 1673. So those are our French explorers, Marquette and Joliet. A few years later, we remember, and I think you can see that. The Mississippi River is right here. And remember another French explorer named La Salle sailed up and down the Mississippi and claimed the entire Mississippi River Valley for France. So we'll put a little French flag on his boat. Sorry, there's supposed to be a little white in there. Hopefully you can see that. So that was the French explorer named La Salle. Remember we talked about French gold seekers coming. They had heard stories about gold and silver. So they came over from France to try and see if they could find what they wanted. They were coming to the area that we now call Missouri. They wanted gold and silver. Sorry, silver. They came, and instead of gold and silver, they only found, if you remember, lead and salt, which wound up being useful. In some ways, the lead became especially important for making bullets. And obviously salt is helpful with preserving food and things like that. So it wasn't worthless, but it wasn't gold and silver that they were hoping for. The last thing on this lesson, we're going to draw some highways in Missouri. And a man named Philip, I'll just write his last name, Renault. Sorry, that's an L. I'm sorry, that's terrible. But he was a lead miner who melted lead ore and formed it into the shape of horse collars. And Renault, they put him on pack mules at first, then he started using carts, and they had to kind of develop a crude road system for that. And so he's credited with Missouri's, building Missouri's first highway system. Okay. So, that's basically all you need to know from Lesson 9. And we'll move on to Lesson 10. Sorry, let me grab this real quick. So in Lesson 10, we have two dots here. This top dot is the mission of Saint Xavier. It was built by Jesuit missionaries in 1700. And it was the first white settlement in Missouri. But it didn't last for whatever reason. That's not part of what we need to know. So in 1735, another settlement was founded by Saint Genevieve. I'm sorry, it's kind of small, but you have all of this written down in your lessons, and I'm sending those to you in case you don't have them for missing one or something. This was another French settlement, and it was the first permanent white settlement. And that was 1735. So, those are two areas you'll need to know about. In 1763, the French and Indian War ended. In 1763. And if you remember, France kind of handed out the land. They gave the east of the Mississippi to England. That might help you remember, east to England. They gave land west of the Mississippi to Spain in a secret treaty. And we're not going to worry about all the details of why in the world they would do that, but that's what they did. So here's our little treaty document that France is handing to Spain. And while they're doing it, they're saying, shh, it's a secret. It's hard to know, but the land was divided up, France's land, east of the Mississippi to England, west of the Mississippi to Spain in the secret treaty. During this time, there was a man we're familiar with, Daniel Boone, who traveled into Spanish territory, which obviously all of Missouri would be Spanish territory because the Mississippi is our eastern edge, so everything west of that would have belonged to Spain. So here's Daniel Boone. We know he didn't like coon hats, so we won't give him a coon hat, but I'm sure he always had his gun with him, the Dick Licker gun. So there's his gun. All right, Daniel Boone's out in Spanish territory. Not long after that, once again, not sure of all the reasoning behind this, but France, sold this, apparently the same land that they had given to Spain in this secret treaty, sold that. France sold the Louisiana Territory, which is this land. It's pictured down here. We'll label that in just a second. To the U.S. in 1803 for $15 million, which may seem like a lot, but it's one of the greatest land deals in history, like 3 cents an acre or something like that. So Thomas Jefferson bought that So here's the outline of the Louisiana Territory. I'll just call it Louisiana Territory. And we all obviously know about the Lewis and Clark expedition, who were sent to explore this and hopefully find a passage to the Pacific Ocean. They didn't find an all-water passage, but they did make it there and then made it home. All right, that's lesson 10. These other lessons, I have already some of the things written out, so that'll make it go a little bit faster. I seem to be missing lesson 13. I'm sorry. I may have to pause this for just a second. All right. So in lesson 12, we have the Missouri Compromise. I'm not sure this was on the review sheet, but I'll just fill it in real quick. Missouri entered as a slave state, balanced by Maine entering as a free state. And the day that Missouri became a state, this I know is on there, August 10th, 1821 was the day that Missouri became a state. The first capital was St. Louis. The Boot Heel section, which is down here, kind of sort of looks like a little boot heel, was added at the time of statehood thanks to the efforts of J. Hardiman Walker, who was a wealthy planter who helped the boot heel be part of Missouri. Also, we have Platte County. This little section of Missouri over here is called Platte County, and it was purchased from the Indians by the United States. This isn't on your test, but Hannibal is the town where Mark Twain grew up. And I'm sorry, I didn't label this down here, the boot heel section. So that's lesson 12. I need to run and find lesson 13, but I don't want to pause this and mess it up. So it's just take me 1 second because I know right where I left it. Hold on. All right, sorry about that. Here we are, lesson 13. Okay, before we get to the map part, I just want to mention Dred Scott was a Missouri slave who sued for his freedom. We'll be reading a book about him in a few weeks. And also, I didn't have this on the lesson before, but this is from lesson 14 that I just hadn't put on one of these pages. George Washington Carver was a Missouri-born slave who found 300 uses for peanuts. So he was born a slave. Actually, the Civil War ended slavery when he was still very young, and then grew up as a free man, but became a scientist and discovered that. So he's kind of a famous person from Missouri. Just a few things on here. Okay, dealing with the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln asked the governor of Missouri, Governor Jackson, to send troops to help fight in the South. I probably should fight against the South, I should have said. And he said no. So obviously there was conflict, which makes sense with Missouri entering as a slave state later on. The first real conflict of the Civil War that took place in Missouri was in Boonville, right in the middle of the state. So that was the first real conflict of the Civil War in Missouri. Not the first conflict of the whole war, but when it finally came to Missouri. And then I think the only other thing on here is the Pony Express was started to get mail across the country as fast as could be done. So it was about 2,000 miles. It started off in St. Joseph, Missouri, and went to Sacramento, California. It took 10 days to make that trip. All right, so that's basically the history section of this. There still is the map section, which we talked about yesterday as well. So they should have a map labeled with just the basic land features and things like that, and then the different land regions labeled, and they'll need to be familiar with those. And I'll type all this up. But I just wanted to, I told them yesterday I'd run through this in a video, so just to kind of help out. There's a lot of information. I think when you see it like this, it might be easier for some people to remember. Other people can just use the study guide I gave out yesterday. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.